Hi, this is Sierra Laricchiuti. I'm a certified music therapist with Voices Together, and I'm so glad you're here. So today we're going to be learning about how to share an anecdote. Now, I know this is mostly geared towards our professionals out there who follow us, but I think it could be useful for parents that are trying to advocate for autism. So what is an anecdote? Here it is. An anecdote is a short story that appeals to the interest of an audience. Why would you need an anecdote? Well, having an anecdote prepared will be a service to your profession and what you're trying to speak towards. It gives both validity and credibility to what you are trying to advocate for. You might need it professionally for an in-service, a staff meeting share, or even for a presentation or a webinar. Here are 3 tips for sharing a well-rounded anecdote. The first tip is focusing on impact. You're going to want to use relatable language, and then you're going to want to involve your audience in the story. So for tip 1, focusing on the impact. When you give a testimonial, you focus on the client and the impact that the model had on the client and how that person might be able to relate to the impact that you're carrying through. It's not about you. It's about the impact and how it relates to the people that you serve. Tip 2, use relatable language. So in the music therapy profession, when we're focusing on evidence-based practice, we can get really used to using a lot of dense clinical language. However, throwing that out the door and relating to your audience will be a best step. It can be really confusing when you're talking to people outside of the profession and using really clinical language. It excludes them from what you're talking about. So always keep in mind that unless they can relate to it, language and emotion included, it's going to be lost if you don't use words that people can easily understand. Tip 3, involve them in the story. Figure out a way to involve your audience personally in your story. Statistics show that the average person only remembers 30% of what they hear, but 70% of what they engage with on a communicative level. So when people are listening to you, they're most often thinking about how they want to respond to what you're saying so that they can chime in later with a thought, a similar experience, or a question. But focus on involving them when you're sharing an anecdote, asking questions, usually at the end, but sometimes in the middle of sharing. Like, how does that resonate with you? Or have you had a similar experience? Or even, how did sharing your anecdote resonate with your client? Or does this match up with the experiences that you've had before? Bottom line, they may not even remember the story that you tell them, but they will remember how your story relates to them on an interpersonal level. So here's an example of a quick anecdote I'm going to share with you, written for the purpose of an in-service presentation that I might give to better inform others about our program. So I would like to share a story about a client of mine named Caroline. So Caroline was a client of mine with autism who really struggled with relating to others. Autism or not, I'm sure that's something we can all relate to. Her mom would often find her alone, isolating from crowds of people that they would regularly socialize with. She was also really unmotivated and disinterested in seeking employment, and that was becoming increasingly important for her in that phase of life. She then enrolled in our pre-employment transition services, or what we call PREETS music therapy program. After a few short weeks, and eventually a year later, she was actively and consistently engaging her peers in conversation, and this is independently doing so. Not just in the group, but even with strangers outside the group, according to her mother. If there was ever a situation in the group where a peer would feel left out, she used her empathy to draw them in, include them, and even ask follow-up questions. The best part is this: because of our program, she's now excited to join the workforce and is thinking about volunteering. Now that socializing and communicating with others has become more natural for her, it seems a lot less intimidating. So my question is this: have you ever had a similar experience where you felt so inhibited by your fears of being isolated? I know that Caroline would tell you it was worth it to be involved and stay connected, even if it's hard, even with autism, and even if it's easier to be alone. So in conclusion, if you would like any additional information regarding our PREETS program or any professional tips, feel free to take a look at our website. Thank you for joining me today.